The ICU hallway was colder than Brynn remembered, the kind of sterile chill that seeped into her bones and made her shiver even though she was fully dressed. Her legs felt heavy, unsteady, as if the polished linoleum floor beneath her was tilting. Moments ago, the hospital had been cautiously optimistic. Sam Heughan was stable, recovering from surgery, with doctors speaking in careful, hopeful tones. But then, a sudden rush of footsteps, alarms from the monitors, and the piercing voice of a nurse calling for a crash cart. Brynn had leapt from her chair before she realized she was moving, heart pounding in her ears. Through the swinging ICU doors, she caught a glimpse of Sam, pale, limp, surrounded by frantic doctors, before the view was cut off by a curtain and the door snapping shut. She tried to speak, but the words came out fractured. "What's happening? What's wrong?" She turned to a nurse, who avoided her eyes and mumbled, "They're doing everything they can." That phrase, "everything they can," rang in her head like a death knell. Her breathing grew shallow. She pressed her palms to her temples, as though she could stop the flood of panic by force. And then her knees gave way. The world tilted, voices became distant. She sank to the cold floor, back against the wall, her head in her hands. Somewhere far off, she heard her own name being called, but it felt like it belonged to someone else. It had been different just an hour before. She'd been by his bedside, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest, thinking they were finally past the worst. She had even smiled when his fingers twitched in hers. The doctor had told her he was stable enough to rest. Now that reassurance felt like a cruel joke. The doors swung open again. A team of doctors pushed Sam's bed back inside, machines beeping in a furious rhythm. Brynn's eyes locked on him, the tubes, the wires, the oxygen mask, and the way his head lolled slightly to the side. "Please, no," she whispered, voice breaking. She wanted to follow, but a nurse's hand pressed gently but firmly against her shoulder. "You can't go in, not right now." Brynn nodded numbly, though the motion felt mechanical. Her body trembled as she lowered herself onto the nearest chair, but her mind refused to stop replaying the image of him vanishing behind that ICU door. She didn't notice the tears until they hit the back of her hand. And when she did, she let them fall freely, the sterile hallway blurring until all she could see was the man she couldn't reach. Brynn came to in a small, dimly lit room with a vinyl couch and the faint hum of a vending machine in the corner. A nurse was crouched beside her, speaking softly. "You fainted. You need water." But Brynn shook her head. "I need to know how he is." The nurse's lips pressed into a line. "They're still working on him. I'll come get you when there's news." She left without another word, the door closing with a click that sounded far too final. Minutes dragged. Brynn's phone buzzed again and again, but she ignored it until a single message lit up the screen from an unknown number. This wasn't just a complication. Someone knew this would happen. Her breath caught. She stared at the message until her eyes blurred, then looked toward the door, half expecting someone to be standing there. Memories started to surface. Conversations with Sam about skipping certain medical tests, his vague comments about not wanting to make things public, and a strange, half-joking remark he'd made 2 weeks ago. "If something happens to me, remember it wasn't an accident." She'd brushed it off then. Now, it felt like a warning she hadn't understood in time. Outside the hospital, reporters were relentless. From the small window in the corner, Brynn could see camera flashes bursting like lightning in the night. Social media feeds were already flooded, blurry photos of her in the hallway. Hashtags screaming speculation. Hashtag Brynn and Sam. Hashtag ICU watch. Hashtag pray for Sam. Some posts painted her as a devoted friend. Others spun conspiracy theories about their relationship. None of them knew the real weight pressing against her ribs. Finally, the door opened and the surgeon stepped in, his face drawn. "He's stable again," he said carefully. "It was touch and go. The cause of the episode is complicated. We'll need to run further tests." But this wasn't typical for post-surgical recovery. Brynn felt her pulse spike. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, glancing toward the hall, We have to consider the possibility of an external trigger." Before she could press him further, a shadow appeared in the doorway. A tall man in a dark coat, his features sharp, unfamiliar. He waited until the surgeon left before stepping inside. "You don't know me," he said in a low voice, "but I've been watching this situation closely. Sam's life is still in danger, and not just from what's happening in that ICU." Brynn's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive, placing it on the table between them. "Everything you need to understand is on here. But once you see it, you can't go back to not knowing." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving Brynn staring at the flash drive, and wondering if the truth might be even worse than the fear she was living through. Brynn's hands hovered over the flash drive like it was a live wire. Every instinct told her to wait, to find Sam first, to hear his voice before she unearthed whatever was inside. But the man's words, "Sam's life is still in danger," replayed in her mind until they drowned out everything else. She crossed to the small desk in the corner, where an outdated hospital laptop sat idle. With a deep breath, she slid the drive into the port. The screen flickered once, twice, then opened a folder with a single video file, dated 3 weeks ago. She clicked it. Grainy security footage filled the screen. It showed Sam in what looked like a parking garage, speaking to someone whose face was obscured by a hood. The audio was muffled, but Brynn could make out one phrase from Sam. "If they find out, it's over for both of us." The hooded figure stepped closer, and for a split second, the camera caught the side of their face, enough for Brynn's stomach to twist. She knew that profile. It wasn't a stranger at all. Brynn froze, her pulse roaring in her ears. The profile on the screen was unmistakable. Someone she had shared dinners with, laughed with, trusted enough to call a friend. It was Tony McGill. Her first instinct was denial. Maybe it was just someone who looked like him. Maybe the footage was altered. But as the hooded figure tilted their head, the faint scar along the jawline removed all doubt. The video ended abruptly, replaced by a text document that opened on its own. One line, in bold. "Ask him why Sam refused the first surgery." Brynn's throat tightened. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about tonight's crisis. There was a deeper history between Sam and Tony, one that had been kept hidden from everyone, including her. A knock at the door jolted her back to the present. She slammed the laptop shut, her heart hammering. Through the frosted glass, she could see the outline of someone waiting. And when the door handle began to turn, she knew she was about to face another truth she wasn't ready for. The door creaked open, and Brynn's breath caught in her throat. Standing there wasn't a nurse, or the surgeon, or even a reporter who'd slipped past security. It was Katrina Balfe. Her expression was unreadable, calm on the surface, but her eyes searched Brynn's face like they were peeling back layers. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her with a quiet click. "We need to talk," Katrina said, her voice low, deliberate. Brynn tried to mask the tremor in her voice. "About Sam?" "No," Katrina replied, pausing just long enough for the weight of the word to sink in. "About Tony." Brynn's stomach churned. She instinctively glanced at the laptop, its screen still dark, the flash drive hidden in her palm. Katrina stepped closer. "I know what you've seen," she murmured. "And if you're smart, you'll stop looking. Some truths will bury you right alongside him." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Somewhere down the hallway, the ICU monitor let out a long, steady beep, and Brynn wasn't sure if it was a coincidence or a warning.